Welcome to Embracing New Life, where we explore the world of mental health, offer hope, and spark meaningful conversations. Together, we navigate the intersections of mental health resources, Christianity, and those who stand in the gap. Today, for Full Episode Friday, we're sharing the full recording of a fascinating conversation between Dr. Dan Green and Ryan Worley on the topic of what is a human. If you've listened to the previous two episodes, much of this will sound familiar, as those episodes were drawn from this very discussion. But for those of you hearing it for the very first time, or even if you're revisiting it, it's a thoughtful, in-depth look at the question that lies at the heart of much of our work and faith. So, you know what to do. Grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, head out for a walk, or settle in for a drive as we dive into this full recording of what it means to be human. Enjoy! Okay, today we're going to be looking at what is a person, how do people thrive in this world. And to lead it off, we're going to start with looking at, as Christians, how do we, in our community of faith, understand humans, and what does that look like? So how would you respond to that, Dr. Green?
Yeah, that's a question that I've explored a lot. Of great interest to me. And I appreciate that framework that you added. As a Christian, how do I understand that? So, like many, I start with the description given us in the Genesis story that we were created in God's image. And that is my starting point. And being created in God's image means we have features similar to the one who created us. Now, we're not the same. We're created. He is the creator. But we have many of the same features that he has. He has designed those into us.
Yeah. Yep.
For example, God is creative. Well, so are people. We each have a unique way of seeing or describing or drawing or painting or sculpting. All kinds of ways we're creative. Creative with how we prepare food, music, just so many ways that we are creative also.
Sure.
God is just. And I'm told by anthropologists, we don't need to teach children how to say it's not fair. That we have that sense of right and wrong and how it ought to be. That's just wired into us.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think we're like our creator.
Yep.
And certainly God is relational. And we are highly relational. So there's just so many examples. We are similar to the one who designed us. Why? Because he designed us.
Indeed. As we think about the idea of things ought to be, there's a recognition on the part of everybody, at least when they're being honest, that, things oftentimes aren't the way that they should be. So that begs the question, yes. Like, if things aren't the way that they should be, how do we, living in a system that isn't the way it should be, how do we thrive? How do we, live in a way that's authentic to who we are and how we've been created, and, do it in a way that allows us to expose to the best ability that we can the way that we've been designed?
So I've observed that when we live congruent with our design, we flourish. And when we live incongruent with the design, we flounder. So that has led me to ask questions along the lines of, well, what is it that we really need in the way we're designed? If our needs are met, likely things are going to go better for us. If our needs are not met, we're going to struggle trying to meet them. And I am of now great confidence that what the true human needs are is to love and be loved, receive love, and to know others and be known by others. That these needs are greater than the other factors that we are encountering, maybe outside of oxygen. But in terms of needs of a person, to love and be loved, to know and be known, are really the essence of what motivates us, what we need, and when those are met, how we flourish.
Yeah, and that gets into just the relationships, right, that we have, and what the quality of our relationships look like, and and how we navigate those. So how do people, lean into relating with other people well, that leads to conversations where they are known and loved and they can know and love others, that brings, albeit there are always going to be issues that occur, but that brings vitality to life so that both parties involved in the relationship can thrive.
Yeah, the great challenge we encounter in this world is to meet our needs to love and be loved, know and be known. We need safety.
Yeah.
But we have to be vulnerable to reveal ourselves or to receive another. Let our guard down, be open, and that's where we can get hurt. So we got this great tension between I need to be loved and to love others, to be known by others, to know others, but I also need safety.
Yeah.
And how do we get both?
Yeah.
That's the great dilemma of the human experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how do you balance that? Because, like we looked at, way back in one of the first episodes that we had, the C.S. Lewis quote of "To love anything is going to mean just heartache, and if you don't want to, have heartache, in a sense, you're just going to bury it alive in a box, basically." And so, how do we navigate that those dangerous waters of needing safety in order to be known and loved and vulnerable, but also knowing when somebody is safe enough, in a sense, to risk it?
Yeah, that's the great human dilemma.
Yeah.
One of the factors that we can consider here is how we manage our boundaries. And by boundaries, I'm referring to that sense of what's me, what's not me. What I will do, what I won't do, what I'm responsible for, what I'm not responsible for. But I am always assessing how safe it is and how to proceed to try to meet the need I have to be known, understood, loved, to love another, to invest in another. We're always assessing that, and we're going to need to take risk, but we need to have a wisdom in taking those risks.
Yeah. Yep. Now, boundaries can oftentimes be a very catchy phrase that people will use. But it's great. Like, boundaries are necessary in order for us to function well with interpersonal relationships, at work, in pretty much every domain of life.
Yes.
What do you think are some misnomers that people have about boundaries, and how can we correct our faulty perceptions in order to have a better understanding of this is a legitimate boundary versus maybe some standard I'm just trying to impose on somebody else so they'll kind of do what I want them to do?
Well, I think you just hit a very important variable, and that is impose on another. A boundary is mine. A boundary is not imposing on another. That's trying to control.
Yeah.
So a boundary is always something that I manage.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, factors about the Christian worldview. God has designed us intentionally, and He has made us the steward or the caretaker of the life He's given us. So we're always called to be managing, caring for, taking care of our life and our responsibilities. What we do does make a difference. When I accept what I do makes a difference, that God has designed me to have that influence, that's appropriate, then I can let go of trying to control the other so that I focus on I'm doing what is good and beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good distinction. Because I think a lot of people will often, like we said at the beginning, use boundaries as a way, intentionally or unintentionally, to manipulate the response or behaviors of others, and to recognize that a boundary is something that I do for myself in the way that I will respond to a given set of scenarios is a good reminder, because it's protective for me.
Very often people are thinking of boundaries in the sense of my boundary is you need to do what I say.
Yeah.
And that is not only destructive to a relationship, it's impossible to enforce, and it greatly diminishes that person's sense of self. Trying to control another, I lose that person God has designed me to be.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is flip that so that I focus on what I will do, what I won't do.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I can address how I'm going to have my needs met.
Yeah.
Now, very often we'd like the other to be a certain way, making it convenient for me to have my needs met. If only you would fill in the blank, then my life would be so much better.
Yeah.
That's backwards.
Yep.
We want to flip that to recognizing I need to love. I need to receive love. Towards that end, I am going to do blank.
Yeah.
At that point, we start to flourish because God has designed us to be actors in our world, not mere responders.
Mm. Yeah. That's good. We have agency in the way that we can move through the world.
And so many of us, for many reasons, have come to believe that we're relatively helpless, or maybe fully helpless, and that we're just dependent on what others do, and that leaves us just being tossed to and fro.
Sure. How do we balance then, that need to have agency in the world because we do, but also balance it with the reality that there is just a lot of stuff that is outside of our control?
That is, again, in terms of our human dilemma, many, many things impact us, influence us.
Yeah.
But they're not about us, and we can't control them.
Mm.
So weather's a good example of this. I'm not a hot weather person.
Amen.
And when it's really hot, it impacts me.
Yeah.
But it's not hot because of me.
For sure.
Nor do I have the ability to make it not hot.
Mm.
So inside the scope of what are my choices, I need to be realistic, accepting what it is. I could, just whine about how hot it is in a given time, and nothing has changed other than I am now more miserable.
Yeah.
Part of what we do to flourish is we recognize and accept what really is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, acceptance doesn't mean endorsement.
Sure.
And I've seen a lot of people struggle. Well, I can't accept that because it's wrong.
Mm.
Well, I encourage them to differentiate accepting, acknowledge that is what it is, and we have to figure out how to cope with it.
Sure.
Acknowledging it's wrong could be a step in coping with it. But if we don't accept it, we are in kind of the old Don Quixote battling the windmills. We're in a scenario where we're fighting against something that nothing is going to change from.
Yeah.
So we accept, and then inside that acceptance, what choices do I have?
Yeah.
If I let go of the choices I don't have, that opens a space to identify the choices I do have. And sometimes it's really helpful to talk to another person to help us see
Sure.
that.
Yeah, most definitely.
That can be helpful.
I mean, it really is when you start to, they're all, as is not surprising, most of life is interconnected, right? And so as we talk about this idea of owning the agency that we have in life while also recognizing there's a lot of stuff that we just can't control, really does fundamentally come down to a clear understanding of boundaries and how to use those well in every area of life.
Right. And that the boundary is not something that I impose on another.
Yeah.
A boundary is how I take care of me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's part of the equation of what gets us to being able to thrive as the humans that God has designed us to be.
Yes. And just even acknowledging I have needs.
Yeah.
And I need to be known.
Yep.
I need to have a few people understand me to some degree. Even just acknowledging that can free us. Actually, it becomes safer to explore that with others.
Yeah.
But if I deny it,
sure,
I'm telling myself, in essence, it's not safe. Don't go there. And yet I need to.
How do we balance, that God-given desire to connect with others through the needs that we have versus our wants?
Mm-hmm. Wants and needs. That's a really intriguing one. Um, One of the ways I would explore that is needs have a consequence when they're not met.
Mm.
Now, I very often want the newest technology. Um, that's just something that has been all my life, all the way back to the advent of the cassette recorder. But I can cope very well with the technology I have in most cases.
Mm.
And so I can acknowledge, yeah, I want it. Oh, that'd be great to have it. But I'm still okay.
Yeah.
But the need to be loved or to love another, to act loving towards other. If I am not active in loving, there are very specific consequences. I will become likely more anxious, more dysphoric. I likely will become more self-centered.
Mm.
You know, the person who's drowning, the only thing that they're focused on is getting air.
Yeah.
And they'll push under the person that comes out to rescue them.
Mm.
When our deep needs aren't met, there are consequences.
Yeah.
Whereas our wants, we can adapt readily with not having wants met.
Sure. Sure. I like what you said there, where when needs aren't met, there is a consequence.
Yes.
That's a good way to think of the difference between a need and a want, and how to understand if one is one of those or the other.
And there's nothing wrong with having wants.
Sure.
That's just an expression of our individuality, the unique person that we are. How do I pursue my wants? Now, that's an area of choices.
Yeah.
And again, that indicates I have agency.
Yep.
What I do does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And do you think as people start to pursue their wants above and beyond, maybe even their needs, that's when they start to become even more self-centered and focused on self, and then create in the wake of their relationships, disaster and lots of issues.
We see many people who, even though they're surrounded by people, are very lonely and isolated. They don't have the experience of knowing anyone very deeply or being known by anybody. Well, that doesn't go away. The need doesn't go away just because it's not being met.
Yeah.
So we humans will try to find comfort or we'll try to find relief in other ways. And often that's pursuing our wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk with couples often, but also with individuals, about when our needs for intimacy, knowing and being known, are not met, we often will substitute intensity.
Yeah.
And the intensity can be manifested in the pursuit of a want.
Sure.
And I feel alive, I feel energy, I'm jacked up. But it doesn't meet the need.
Yeah.
It doesn't meet the need.
Does it feel to the individual who is pursuing intensity over intimacy as the need is being met just short-lived?
Yes, in the short-lived part, I think is essential there because they need to keep the intensity up.
Sure.
So we know some people will say, "Oh, they're so dramatic. They're always involved in a drama."
Mm.
Well, many relationships are that way. That I know I need something in this relationship, and as long as there's all this tension or strife or activity between us, it feels like we're connected.
Yeah.
As soon as that intensity diminishes, now it's intriguing, that intensity diminishes, it's unrewarding. They go try to repeat the pattern.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. We're told, be still and know that I am God.
Mm.
That form of knowing and being known, that form of intimacy, talks about being still, not being intense.
Yeah.
And so a question that we could ask when someone is seeing, are my needs being met? How do I deal with quiet?
Sure.
Do I ever have quiet? Many never have quiet.
Yeah.
And with all our electronic options, it's easy to fill every space with sound and image.
For sure.
And other sensations.
Yeah. something that keeps the system kind of amped up and going.
Keeps our neurological system
Yeah.
in that constant high level of arousal, which seems like, but is unsatisfying.
For sure. Now, if someone, listening is, thinks of their life and the relationships that they have, and they think to themselves, wow, I think I might be substituting intensity for intimacy. What are some steps that maybe they can, proactively take to start to correct that phenomenon?
Yeah, so one of the things we'd explore with them is experiencing quiet, experiencing being in the now. The Gospels call us to be present focused, not to be worried about tomorrow, not to be living in the past or the future, but to live in the now. Along those lines, in the now, non-judgmentally recognizing what I'm experiencing, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And one could say, well, yes, but some of the things I think aren't good. Well, when I non-judgmentally recognize them, I can then make choices. Well, what do I want to do with this?
Agency.
I have agency. What I do makes a difference. But I need to slow down and connect with me, because my need to know is not only to know others, but I need to know me as well. That's part of our design.
Yeah. I think the slowing down is a key factor because of the reality of how quickly we get so conditioned to habitual behavior or responses that if we can train ourselves just to pause for a moment and really take in and think about what am I doing here, it makes a huge impact just in the ways that we process information or respond in a given scenario.
It really does. We are designed to have quiet. And many of us find quiet boring.
Yeah.
We've become habituated, or it's become a habit to be so stimulated.
Yeah.
But that's not how our body is designed to function.
Not at all. Yeah. I find it interesting. I was just talking to a guy recently about this idea that, in Genesis at the beginning with the creation account, you have God designing humans to work. So, we are designed to work, but we're also designed to take a pause and walk in the cool of the day with God.
Yes.
where we disconnect from that. I don't know if you'd call it primary, but that task that God has given us to engage in basically a self-care phenomenon of enjoying the company or the relationship of the God who has created us, or in the case of being in here on earth and talking about relationships like we are now, having relationships the way that God's designed it.
Yes, because in that narrative, this is before the fall.
Yeah.
And they're both good.
For sure.
So many of us are identifying one or the other. Some work provides an identity, work provides a purpose. For others, leisure provides their identity.
Yeah.
Being off duty. But in the Genesis story, the wholeness is good, not just one or the other.
And that's part of the design, right?
That's the design.
That's how we're made to function,
Right.
And that's how we thrive well.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we ask that question, well, what is a person? A person made in the image of God, intentional, on purpose, with specific characteristics that we can identify. And that's one of the things that fascinates me about a person, is that self-awareness that we can develop. And now none of us have complete self-awareness.
Sure.
But we grow in it. And that is part of our design, to have that self-awareness.
Most definitely. Now, as we circle back around to, being known and knowing, loving and being loved, and then the safety that we find in relationships when we have those things. I've heard you say before, and so I think it'd be good for you to explain your perspective on this, where there are usually two variables that any person in a relationship control that can kind of determine the quality and depth of a relationship, and can be a good marker for individuals as they're trying to understand, is this a healthy relationship? Is it not a healthy relationship? How much should I give to this relationship, or how much should I hold back, or not hold back, but just be cautious. And those two variables that I've heard you say are accessibility and vulnerability. And both individuals in a relationship have the capacity to go deeper with those variables. But those are two markers that are you can kind of
Yeah, I have found that really helpful to be aware of those factors. Um, Many times people will say, because of the relationship, I should get love here, I should be known here. Um, that's not true for anyone all the time, let alone for some, it's never true.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one person who came from a very painful background, and she was sharing with me, but she's my mother. Of course, she loves me, and this is in light of a letter that her mother had given her saying, "I never did love you. I don't love you. Please leave me alone." Hard letter to get from your mom,
For sure.
but the reality is, while most moms love their children, not all do.
Yeah.
How do we sort through this? So one variable is that in order to connect with another person, there must be some accessibility, some availability. Right now, I'm not able to connect with my wife because she's in a different building than I'm at, somewhere else, some miles from here.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem in our relationship. It's not available right now.
Yeah.
But just recently, we were both sitting together in our family room, and we were both reading, and we're available to each other. We're accessible right there, but we were in our own worlds reading.
Sure.
And while it was very pleasant and very comfortable, we weren't getting to know each other more deeply in that moment. We weren't sharing loving acts in that moment. It was just comforting to be together. And that's good also. So to really connect with the person, are they available? But then second, are they vulnerable? Meaning, will they receive what I offer without judgment? Will they reveal themselves to me, what it's like to be them?
Yeah.
We can be in the same room and not vulnerable for many reasons. One, we're doing something else, reading. Or one of us is defended, or we're both guarded.
Yeah.
Or something is troubling us that we're so consumed with that we don't have the bandwidth to be open to the other in that moment. Whatever, many reasons. And that highlights how precious it is when we do have those times with another human.
For sure.
When we're available and vulnerable simultaneously. But we also can be intentional about that.
For sure.
And that, back to agency again.
Yeah.
What we do makes a difference.
Yeah.
We can intentionally choose, I want to set aside other things. I want to hear you. I want to set aside other things to be with you. And I'd like to share with you what it's like to be me right now. We can do that intentionally.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. I was listening to probably NPR, some podcast, not too long ago, and they were talking about the statistic that for once you get past your 20s, every decade that you go, you lose a significant friend. And they said there's a number of different reasons for that. Relocation because of job, or potentially death, or for some other reason. So how, as you get older in life, how do you intentionally invest in relationships that bring accessibility and vulnerability so that we can be known and loved and thrive in a way that is helpful and healthy in this world?
Well, I would recommend that we do it intentionally. I know a lot of people just show up at events, and if you're an extrovert, that might work to some degree for you, but just sharing activities is only the start. That doesn't lead to really our needs being met.
Yeah.
To choose to invest in relating with others, invite them over, share with them, ask them questions. Curiosity is such an important factor here. Being curious about what it's like to be the other person is a safe, open door, typically, that facilitates some connecting with each other.
Yeah.
while it's important to share activities, relating to meet our needs is much more than just sharing activities.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So just intentionally pursuing people in a curious way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to somebody who's like, I feel like I have relationships. I do feel like they're accessible and vulnerable, but I feel like I'm the one that's always asking to do stuff. Would you say keep doing it, or is there an imbalance there that needs to potentially be looked at?
Well, that's intriguing. I'm thinking back to some research that's done some time ago along those lines, and what they found is that quite often both parties feel like it's out of balance. That we tend to be more focused on when we take the risk and less recognizing when the other takes the
Sure.
risk.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility.
Most
Now,
definitely.
there are certainly some relationships where one does initiate far more than another.
Sure.
And we can decide, and that's what's wonderful about having agency.
Yeah.
We can decide how much we want to invest in that relationship. I would strongly encourage to not be dichotomous, all or nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut them off.
Sure.
But if I want to be in relationships that have a more balanced initiating, I'm going to need to find some space to build those relationships. So I probably will do less with the ones that I don't find as rewarding.
Sure.
Another factor that sometimes is helpful is talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, we always do what I want to do, and I'm curious to know, what would you like to do?
Yeah. That's a great idea.
How about we intentionally next time when we get together, why don't you put it together that I'm really wanting to do what you'd like to do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. It brings me back to just recently the research that was released, a pretty longitudinal study that was done on, what contributes to longevity in life, or what's the greatest factor that we can measure that contributes to longevity in life. And especially because of our topic today of, what are humans? How do we thrive? What is, what's it like to be known and loved and to love and know and safety? The research study found that the quality of our relationships is the greatest indicator, at least from what they could tell from the study, the greatest indicator of longevity in life. And it's just a powerful reminder and example of just how important, and it's just part of the way we're designed, how important it is to connect well with others, and how it behooves us to take the agency that we have and intentionally make the choice to do so.
Absolutely. Center for Disease Control has recognized that loneliness is a very significant contributor to disease. Um, when we live incongruent with how we're designed, it has real significant consequences,
Yeah.
even on our bodies.
Yeah. 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 There's a holistic impact that it has in our life, not just from a psychological or cognitive functioning factor, but also a physical.
Very much so.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it's just another indication that of the design that God has designed us with. In that, man, we just need people as much as we like to think sometimes that we don't. In order to thrive in this world, in order to be healthy as healthy as we can in a world that's not the way it was designed to be, we just need others as support and help.
That's really true for all of us, even those who might have features where it looks like they're loners. They may need less contact, but their needs to love and be loved, know and be known are still present.
Yeah.
And it's really important. Even the person who's seemingly wanting to be alone all the time, they still have the same needs. They just experience them in a bit different way than many others would.
Yeah. And that's a great reminder not to, in a sense, project what we need onto what other people need, because our needs for human connection, to know and be known, to love and be loved, is a spectrum, and there's a lot of variance along that.
Yes, there is. And when I'm with a person, I may not know them at all, but I do know that they need to be understood and to understand others, that they need to be loved and to love as well.
Yeah.
Knowing that creates a sense of safety.
Mm.
It's not just me that has these needs.
Sure.
Or it's not just many of us, all of us. And even the person that may seem threatening, they have the same needs. Mm. So I can understand their threatening acts, why I might want to have a little more distance from them.
Sure.
But that's about them trying to live their life rather than there's something either wrong with me or there's something I need to do to fix them.
Yeah.
Neither one of those are evidenced by how they're living.
Yeah. 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 Great reminder. And I know that there are probably hours and hours that we could talk about a number of different topics that we discussed today. But this was a good start to understanding, how do we understand humans? Mm-hmm. What are they? How does God design them? And some of the fundamentals that exist with thriving and living well in this world.
Uh-huh. No, I look forward to these future explorations of these kind of topics.
Yeah. There's a lot to dive into.
There's a lot.
That's for sure.
Humans are never boring.
That is true. Embracing New Life is a production of New Life Resources, a Christian counseling clinic in southeast Wisconsin, whose aim and goal since 1976 has been to provide high-quality professional counseling, psychological, and consulting services from within a Christian framework.